The rain fell in sheets, drumming against the cracked pavement of the narrow alley. The city was alive with the hum of neon lights and the distant wail of sirens. But here, in the shadow of the old brick buildings, it felt like the world had been swallowed by darkness. Detective Marcus Hale pulled his trench coat tighter around his shoulders, the cold seeping into his bones. He hated nights like this, nights that smelled of desperation and secrets. He stood over the body, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. She was young, no older than 25, with pale skin and dark hair plastered to her face by the rain. Her eyes were wide open, staring at nothing, and her lips were parted as if she had been about to speak. A single gunshot wound to the chest had ended her life, the blood washed away by the rain, but still staining her white dress a faint pink. "Who is she?" Marcus asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Jane Doe for now," replied Officer Daniels, a rookie who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "No ID, no purse, nothing, just her." Marcus crouched beside the body, his gloved hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. There was something familiar about her, something he couldn't quite place. He'd seen too many faces over the years, too many lives cut short. But this one felt different. "Any witnesses?" Marcus asked, standing up and scanning the alley. Daniels shook his head. "Nothing so far, but we're still canvassing the area. Someone must have seen something." Marcus nodded, his mind already racing. He'd been a detective for 15 years, and he'd learned to trust his instincts. And right now, his instincts were telling him that this wasn't a random killing. There was something deliberate about it, something personal. The precinct was a hive of activity, even at this late hour. Marcus sat at his desk, a cup of cold coffee in one hand and a file in the other. The initial report on Jane Doe had come in, and it wasn't much. No fingerprints on record, no DNA matches. She was a ghost. But Marcus had seen the way she was dressed. Expensive shoes, a designer dress. She didn't belong in that alley. She belonged in some upscale club, sipping champagne and laughing with friends. So what had brought her there? And who had wanted her dead? He was about to dive deeper into the file when his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. "Detective Hale," he answered, his voice clipped. "Marcus," a familiar voice said, and his blood ran cold. It was her. "Evelyn." "Evelyn," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" "I heard about the girl," she said, her voice smooth and calm, like she was discussing the weather. "I thought you might want to know that she was one of mine." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. Evelyn had been his informant years ago, back when he was working narcotics. She was connected, too connected. She knew everyone, heard everything. But she'd disappeared 5 years ago, and he'd thought he was done with her. "What do you mean, one of yours?" he asked, his voice low. "She worked for me," Evelyn said. "Not directly, of course, but she was part of the network. And now she's dead, and I think you know what that means." Marcus did know. It meant trouble. Evelyn's network was a web of informants, smugglers, and dealers. If the girl had been part of it, her death was a message. And messages like that were never good. "Why are you calling me, Evelyn?" Marcus asked. "What do you want?" "I want you to find out who killed her," Evelyn said. "And I want you to do it quietly. No cops, no paperwork, just you." Marcus laughed, a bitter sound. "You've got a lot of nerve, Evelyn. You disappear for 5 years, and now you want me to do your dirty work?" "I'm not asking you to do it for me," Evelyn said. "I'm asking you to do it for her. She didn't deserve this, Marcus. And if you don't find out who did it, more people are going to die." The line went dead, and Marcus stared at the phone in his hand. He knew he should walk away. He should hand the case over to someone else and let them deal with it. But he couldn't. Evelyn had gotten under his skin, just like she always did. And now he was in too deep. The club was called Obsidian, a sleek, black building tucked away in the heart of the city's nightlife district. It was the kind of place where the rich and powerful went to play, where deals were made in dark corners and secrets were traded like currency. Marcus hated it. He flashed his badge at the bouncer, a mountain of a man with a face like granite, and was led inside without a word. The music was deafening, the bass thumping in his chest as he made his way through the crowd. He scanned the room, looking for anyone who might know something about the girl. And then he saw her. She was sitting at the bar, her back to him, but he recognized her immediately. It was the girl from the alley, or at least, someone who looked just like her. His heart skipped a beat, and he pushed his way through the crowd, his eyes never leaving her. When he reached the bar, he grabbed her arm, spinning her around to face him. But it wasn't her. The resemblance was uncanny, but this girl was older, her eyes harder, her smile colder. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Marcus let go of her arm, his mind racing. "I'm looking for someone," he said. "A girl. She looks like you." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Lots of girls look like me, detective. You'll have to be more specific." Marcus pulled out his phone, showing her a picture of the dead girl. "Her. Do you know her?" The woman's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition. She took a sip of her drink, her hand steady, and shook her head. "Never seen her before," she said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a party to get back to." She slid off the bar stool and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Marcus standing there, his mind racing. He knew she was lying, but why? The next morning, Marcus was back at the precinct, poring over the case files. He'd spent the rest of the night trying to track down the woman from the club, but she'd vanished like a ghost. He was no closer to finding out who the dead girl was, or why she'd been killed. And then his phone buzzed again. It was Evelyn. "Did you find anything?" she asked, her voice tense. "Not much," Marcus admitted, "but I'm getting closer. Why don't you tell me what you know, Evelyn? Save us both some time." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Marcus thought she'd hung up. But then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her name was Lila," Evelyn said. "She was a courier. She moved things, money, drugs, information. She was good at it. Too good. Someone must have found out what she was carrying, and they killed her for it." Marcus frowned. "What was she carrying?" "I don't know," Evelyn admitted, "but it must have been important and dangerous." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. If Lila had been carrying something valuable, something worth killing for, then whoever had it now was in danger too. And if Evelyn was right, more people were going to die. Where was she going? Marcus asked. Who was she delivering to? Evelyn hesitated. "I don't know," she said finally, "but I can tell you this. Whoever killed her is still out there, and they're not going to stop until they get what they want." The line went dead, and Marcus stared at the phone in his hand. He knew what he had to do. He had to find out what Lila had been carrying, and he had to find it before the killer did. The trail led him to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was a crumbling, rusted shell of a building, surrounded by chain-link fences and warning signs. Marcus parked his car a block away and approached on foot, his gun drawn. The inside of the warehouse was dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of mildew and decay. Marcus moved slowly, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he knew it had to be here. And then he saw it, a small, black briefcase, sitting on a table in the middle of the room. Marcus approached it cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. He set his flashlight down and opened the case, revealing stacks of cash, a handful of flash drives, and a single, unmarked envelope. He picked up the envelope, his hands trembling, and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in names and numbers. It was a list of people, their addresses, their bank accounts, their secrets. Marcus's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a list. It was a hit list, and Lila had been carrying it. He heard a noise behind him and spun around, his gun raised. But it was too late. The shot rang out, echoing through the warehouse, and Marcus felt the bullet tear through his chest. He fell to the ground, the list slipping from his fingers as the world went dark. When Marcus woke up, he was in a hospital bed, the sterile white walls closing in around him. His chest was bandaged, and his head felt like it was full of cotton. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his body, and he fell back against the pillows. "Easy, detective," a voice said, and Marcus turned to see Officer Daniels standing by the bed. "You're lucky to be alive." Marcus frowned, his mind still foggy. "What happened?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "You were shot," Daniels said. "We found you in the warehouse. You've been out for 2 days." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "The briefcase," he said. "Did you find it?" Daniels nodded. "We did. And the list. It's being handled by the feds now." "You did good, Detective." Marcus shook his head. "No," he said. "I didn't do enough. Lila's still dead, and the killer's still out there." Daniels hesitated, then pulled a chair up to the bed. "There's something else," he said. "We found a note in the briefcase. It was addressed to you." Marcus frowned. "To me?" Daniels nodded and handed him a small piece of paper. Marcus unfolded it, his hands trembling, and read the words written in neat, precise handwriting. "You're getting too close, Marcus. Stop now, or you'll end up like Lila." Marcus stared at the note, his mind racing. He didn't know who had written it, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to stop. Not until he found out who had killed Lila. Not until he brought them to justice. Because that's what he did. That's who he was. And no one was going to take that away from him.